Perfect. Okay. All right. Well, I want to welcome I want to welcome everybody to tonight's meeting. We're going to talk a little bit about um, some ways to improve affordable housing in the neighborhood, both how to bring in more, and then as well as from the city's perspective, what they're doing to kind of encourage more through developments. But I want to first kind of define a couple things for everybody. So I'm going to share my screen here. Everyone can see that? Okay. I just kind of want to go through some quick little things about kind of what affordable housing means. For those of you playing along at home, this is mostly from Chapter 3 of the Neighborhood Plan. So here we go. So in the context of the neighborhood plan, affordability of homes in the neighborhood is really a large concern for residents. About 62% of the housing units in McKinley Park are multi-family or multi-unit buildings. So think your 2 flats, your 3 flats, your 4 flats. 87% of those are renter occupied. So at least one of those units is going to have a renter in it. And then 70% of rental units are affordable to those making 60% of the area median income, or the AMI. So if the area median income is about $46,000 for the neighborhood, and then 60% of that is about $27,000. To put that in context, the city as a whole, that area median income is about $55,000. So the neighborhood itself is a little bit lower than the city's overall average. The reason people kind of look to affordable housing in neighborhoods like ours, for example, or kind of other neighboring neighborhoods, is that in McKinley Park specifically, about 38% of homeowners and about 53% of renters have some kind of housing cost burden. So, they pay, extra in rent or extra in mortgage, or kind of some other fee associated with being a homeowner or a renter, and it makes things like buying groceries difficult, or going to the doctor difficult, or affording other basic things difficult because so much of their income is going towards their housing. And then just a couple stats. Housing types in McKinley Park. There's about 3 to 5,000 different housing units in the neighborhood. So you have things like single family detached or attached, but also 2 units, which makes up just over the majority of it, about 36%. But then you got 3 or 4 units and then 5 units. So those multi-unit buildings. If we go to some more neighborhood statistics for as far as income goes, those making the at or below the area median income, it's about half. It's a little more than half of the residents in the neighborhood. So what is that? 54%, 55%. So a large chunk of the neighborhood would benefit from having more affordable housing stock that they can choose from. And then, like I said, this is some more stats for what kind of housing types there are, and how they've changed over the years, and then as well as the household size. So your 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, up to your 5-bedroom size. So we can see that a large number of the housing stock is 2 and 3 bedrooms, as well as the typical two flat that we associate with the neighborhood. And then a lot of those, most were built before 1940. So well over half. So kind of what can be done about these things to kind of increase the affordability of the neighborhood as a whole. You can increase the housing stock. We learned a little bit about that through things like ETOD when we presented, had the developer present in was that February. You can also limit things like multi-building conversion. So some of the trends are, you're taking those 2 and 3 flats and you're making those into single family homes. But then you can also encourage things like multi-unit developments. We'll have the AROs or those affordable units on site, rather than paying to either get out of having to make those or putting them offsite into a different location. And then there's also programs like the Chicago Community Land Trust. There's repair programs, and then the purchase assistant or purchase rehab programs, which provides assistance to homeowners to, you know, invest in their properties and improve their properties. Yeah, so those are the kind of different options to help kind of improve or increase the amount of affordable units in the neighborhood. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. Okay. So with that, I want to kind of go right into our guest speakers. So we've got Laura and Demetrio from the Pilsen Housing Cooperative, and they're going to talk a little bit tonight about what a housing cooperative is, as well as kind of what some of the benefits are, and then we'll have a chance for people to ask some questions about it, and then we'll have Ricardo Lopez from the Department of Housing talk about an updated Affordable Requirements Ordinance, or that ARO, that is being put forward towards City Council pretty soon, and then kind of what that means for McKinley Park. So I'm going to invite Laura or Demetrio. Whenever you guys are ready, go right ahead.
Okay, just give me 1 minute to get my screen set up. Okay, so today we're just going to provide an overview of the Pilsen Housing Co-op. This is a slight adjustment of the presentation that we give to Pilsen residents. Generally, as we're looking for more co-op members, I've left the translation on the slides, so most slides are Spanish and English. I'm a board member of the co-op, but I am not a resident. I actually am a resident of McKinley Park. And Demetrio is a board member and resident of our first building, and I'll talk a bit more about that. I just do want to mention the context of Pilsen is that we have skyrocketing housing values, as there's a lot of gentrification, and not only is the sale of the buildings high, but the taxes are going through the roof and on properties, and we're seeing a lot of community members being displaced. Pilsen also has a very low home ownership rate for the city among those who actually reside in Pilsen, so we're a high rental community as well. And so that's part of what forms how we've decided to form as a co-op. I realize that not everyone knows what a cooperative is. At the end of the day, as a cooperative is an entity, a business that is owned by its stakeholders. So you can have a worker co-op, which is a business owned by the workers, a consumer co-op, which is a business owned by the consumers, such as cooperative supermarkets. And you can have a housing co-op where all the property is owned by the residents. In addition, in terms of our housing co-op, it's a business not only that we own, that is owned by the members, or the residents, but it's also run by the residents. One requirement of our co-op is that members must have their unit as their primary residence. So one way of ensuring that owners are also really invested in the co-op sustainability and its operation. We also have, of course, very specific principles to our co-op. We are trying to maintain affordability or create affordability where it's been lost in the Pilsen community, and we're also trying to preserve community. To do that, we are both nonprofit and we're limited equity, and I'll go into more detail on that in a moment. We're a scattered site. Similarly, there are not a lot of very large buildings in Pilsen. So what we can do is incorporate more buildings. And so everyone who is a resident of one building is also a co-owner of all of the buildings that become part of the co-op. And we're currently in the process of purchasing our second building with a total of, I think, 12. We'll have a total of 12 residences. We're explicitly anti-displacement. So when we're considering our pricing, considering what we're able to afford in terms of purchasing buildings, and also in our selecting our residents, we're looking at need. Because of the pricing, because prices are already so high in Pilsen, we're aiming for about 80% AMI, area median income for Chicago, which would be $75,000 income for a family of 4 or $52,000 for a family of 1. We would love to do go lower than that, but it's simply not possible with the degree of maintenance that Pilsen buildings need at this point, and combined with their prices. Also, because we have, in order to accomplish this, we also need policy support and funding support. So we're working on, supporting any opportunities that would benefit the rest of, the development or expansion of cooperative housing around the city. So how it functions, just in terms of cooperative purchasing a building. The cooperative purchases the building in its name, so Pilsen Housing Cooperative, which we just refer to as PIHCO. So PIHCO purchases the building. The mortgage is in the cooperative's name. It's not in the name of its residents. And then families who want to live in the building buy a share. So that share gives them the right to occupy a residence and make a unit and make most decisions about that unit, but they're not actually the owners of the unit. This also, but this means that the cooperative as a whole is taking on all the work of securing the loan and putting their name out there. And that also becomes part of how we get ensure that more community members can take part and secure housing. So what happens, one of the other pieces of affordability is limiting equity, which means that we're placing a legal cap on the sale price. So if you buy a unit that's $100,000, you pay it off, you leave in 20 years, you're ready to sell it, you're not going to get much more back than $100,000. Which allows us then to sell to the next family that wants to occupy the unit for $100,000 or potentially a little bit more. It doesn't matter what happens on the housing market. We may see some increase in what people get as a return, but basically people are agreeing with the idea of maintaining the prices stable and preserving affordability in the long term, that they're sacrificing that they won't be making any profit off of the unit. But they also won't be losing it all in rent. So what does this mean for people? It means that, we can reasonably be doing outreach and targeting Pilsen renters who've our former Pilsen renters who've already been displaced or at risk of displacement. It means that we are going to be taxed at affordable housing and owner-occupied rates because of those other requirements we've put in place, and we're splitting that tax burden. Families can buy in without qualifying for their own mortgage, and as well as families who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford the traditional down payment. And then also, the other burdens of home ownership are doing the work of planning and carrying out maintenance, shouldering all the costs, and anything else associated with building ownership. And so that is also shared among members. And of course, then that fosters just a larger community as well. It's really invested in community. So those are really how we get to our goals. And then briefly, we do make people apply to be members. Some of the criteria we use which also goes towards the sustainability of the co-op, because everyone's participating in decision-making around the co-op. We need to ensure that those who join the co-op are committed to its values and the way we've set it up. So we're looking at people's connection to the Pilsen community, people who are willing to have it as the unit as their primary residence. It doesn't have to be their first home, though it is for most people, but it does have to be their primary residence. We do have to consider whether the costs will be feasible for people, because there are so many folks in Pilsen who are at 30 or 50% AMI, right? People need to be, prepared to be present and cooperate. There is a good deal of work involved. Agreeing that, they will need permission from the co-op for some things on their unit. So you can't just go knock down a wall. You have to get everyone's permission. And then the commitment to long-term affordability, which while it's attractive in the short term, it also has to be attractive in the long term, because continuing that into the long term is what's going to make the co-op viable and make this actually a long-term affordability project. And not every co-op, of course, has to be set up this way, but this is how we've set it up to carry out, to meet our objectives. So just to take a little bit of a look at the pricing, right now our units are between $100,000 and $200,000, which going up to 3-bedroom units we have. I don't think we've actually, we've not yet surpassed $200,000 by very far for a unit. The unit price varies a bit with square footage, and what the price takes into account is both the purchase price of the building as well as the cost of any major repairs that are needed to make it a comfortable and viable place to live, especially things like roofing, electricity, HVAC systems, plumbing, any structural issues that might need to be addressed. So we factor that into the cost, and this is what we're able to do. And again, these are prices that meet those AMI goals. For the down payment, one of the things that getting a cooperative mortgage by the cooperative allows us to do, it means that we need to cover 10% of the project costs, and we can cover that in any way possible. So if we have 2 units and each is $100,000, then between those 2 households, we need $20,000 in down payment, and that can come in any way, in any sort of arrangement. So we can have a family that's able to pay $18,000, and if we have a family that's only able to pay $2,000, if we have another family that can pay $18,000, then we're set. We don't have to refuse anyone because they don't have enough for the down payment if we can balance things out, and we have been able to make those arrangements. So that also allows us some more flexibility in getting more folks into the co-op. The monthly charges, of course, then are going to vary with what people have put on their down payment. And of course, the size of the unit. And then we have our monthly charges. So monthly charges, this is a little bit different. This has some similarities to condominium arrangement where you have monthly operation, where you do have monthly charges. However, these cover a lot more, again, because everything is taken care of together. So here, if you have a $126,000 unit, the monthly charges with a down payment of $15,000, the monthly charges are going to be $1,265, with part of that going to the mortgage, right, the principal and interest, and just a bit under half going to the operations. And of course, that already includes property taxes, insurance. It covers things like any legal fees, of filing costs, accounting, for anything we have to do related for the yearly accounting work, training, and subscriptions. And it also considers, say, supplies for any minor repairs that need to be done, as well as contributing to our capital reserves fund. So basically everything is covered. The only things that families have to cover on their own are things like electricity, heat, gas, internet, right? Those very individual monthly costs, but there's really nothing beyond this. And the way we've calculated is that so there shouldn't be any large assessments coming about unless there's really major damage. But so a lot of these costs in other models, like a condominium model, would be shouldered beyond the monthly housing fees. So that is one thing to consider when comparing those. What it took to set this up. This is a project that's been going on for 4 to 5 years since our founders began thinking about a cooperative model. They found pro bono legal counsel, and I know there are a number of legal clinics interested in supporting housing cooperative development. Originally, we had a steering committee, which and it was an all volunteer group. It's still, our board is also an all volunteer group, divided into different committees that took care of the different pieces we needed. We needed to find homeowners who were willing to sell and really interested in selling in a somewhat more non-traditional way. We needed members of the community who were interested in joining and to do a lot of education around what cooperative living looks like. A policy and funding committee. So we've been speaking a lot with the city about how the city can support cooperative housing at different levels. And of course, the work of purchasing the property, we had to create bylaws that just structure the co-op as a whole. And then we need occupancy agreements and purchase agreements that we had to create for individual residents. We will have house rules for each building. So right now our house rules are, because we only have one building, our house rules are basically decided by the board, but eventually each building will have its own set of rules. And of course, once we purchased our property, we formed we moved from a steering committee to a board of directors. And so just the last piece is I wanted to talk about was a bit of decision making. So how decision making works. Currently, every household has a seat on the board of directors. So we have 6 households, so 6 seats. So that's one household, 1 vote. And then we have 5 additional board members, including myself, who are not residents of the co-op, who were on the steering committee beforehand. Once we have more residents, more households, then board seats, we will move to an elected board format. Generally, we meet monthly for about 2 hours each, unless we have something major processing that we need to meet about. But we're able to get most of the work done in those monthly meetings, with everyone taking care of other pieces a few hours a month outside of that. And similarly, our committees remain the same as before, except now we have more accounting work, member training, and sort of house maintenance, building maintenance work. Generally, most decisions are made by the board with 2/3 to pass. We have a few things that are meant to keep the co-op going in the long term, so major decisions will be decided by all of the membership voting. So if we have a building that's just requiring immense amounts of investment and it's going to threaten the sustainability of the co-op to keep it going, we need 65% of all members to vote on that. If someone wants to disband the co-op, we need every single household but one would have to agree to something as big as that. So just to give an example of how we've thought about both kind of democratic decision making and who should be making different kinds of decisions or involved in that. And this is all in our bylaws. But overall, what we see, there are limitations. We can't do everything, and there's some rigidity to it, but it allows us to form housing where people really get a voice in what is going on. They're building some savings through equity, right? Money that is not just going to a landlord, especially given the kind of a high rental community that we're working in. It allows folks who would not be able to, again, qualify for a loan, afford down payment, or who might not want to have interaction with banks, with city, government, because of legal status, or whose legal status might otherwise create a barrier for home ownership. It allows them, where that is also accommodated by this model. We get tax protections and therefore some stability in pricing in the long term and costs. And otherwise a form of housing that's also inherently a form of community building. So that's a presentation. And then we're both here to answer any questions. And Dimitri is a resident of the building. I might have said that before, but so apologies if I'm repeating myself, so he can also answer beyond general questions about the co-op. Also answer questions about the day-to-day of cooperative residence life.
Yeah, I could pretty much speak to the lived experience. We were one of the first families to join the co-op, and we're very close to the founders and through the work in our community. So I'm happy to answer any of the questions that any of you might have about what it's like.
Great, thank you. We got time for maybe 2 or 3 questions if people got them. I want to point out that there's a couple people watching on Facebook Live. If we are monitoring the chat, so if you've got some questions on there, please chime in, and we will try to acknowledge those as well. Are there any questions from the group?
Super quick question. Can you all hear me? You spoke about some of the challenges or barriers that you have right now that exist to lowering the target income level for some of your residents. What, in your view, are some of the things that an organization such as yours, or just other factors that you feel can lower the overall cost for providing housing under this model?
I will just add one thing, just really, because again, I come from like the lived experience, and it's really what it really kind of boils down to is the cost of actual purchase of the building. And one of the biggest challenges that PIHCO has had is actually finding property owners or homeowners that are willing to kind of come down to a price that meets our goals. Because a lot of folks, particularly in Pilsen, it's becoming a hot area. So people know that they could profit from it. So it's really important. One thing that's really important, at least for me, is in my experience, is talk to everyone that you know, like know your neighbors. The neighbors that live next to you or down the street or just in your neighborhood and community who share the same values and are experiencing the same things are the people who are going to be your allies, your partners, and the people who are going to be willing to sell you buildings at a lower cost. So that way we can bring that cost down for families. And that's something that's directly impacted our first building. And I think is very important as part of mission building and movement building in the community.
Thank you.
Yes, and I think our first the first building owner that we bought from is now a resident of the cooperative, and so he was also invested in remaining in the building, remaining in the community, and was willing to sell to sell below what the building value would have been. I think one thing that it's it's structured into our bylaws is if we can get funding for units, we can apply the funding to stick the funding to the unit. So the purchase price will be lower for the household that will buy the share. But then that subsidy, that additional funding will stick with the unit in perpetuity. That's how our bylaws are set up for us to be able to do that. And then of course we've been working with the city to find new routes for funding, because there is a lot of interest for sure in supporting cooperative housing development, because we do have a major, affordability issue throughout the city. So, we're looking for other ways of foundations and private funders who might be interested in donating.
Great, thanks. We'll do one more question from Kate. So just real quick, she wanted to know how new residents are vetted or allowed to be, chosen to be a part of the co-op.
Generally, we have everyone fill out a survey just about their kind of general objectives and ties to Pilsen, sort of income and ways they might be able to make this work. And then we interview, I guess we've only done this once, but we basically interview those who have really said, I'm ready to go. Part of it is how ready are you to join the cooperative? Right. And at the point that we have a building, we make sure everyone who wants to be part of that building has a ready to go status. And we interview them and just talk very, frankly about, what their current housing costs are and can they afford it, and who is going to live in the unit and why they're interested. In some ways, one thing is because we're focused on, because we're focused on affordability, we also want to make sure that it's a good fit. So we could have an individual with, more flexible income who can afford a larger unit, and we're not going to allow that person to purchase the share that corresponds to that unit, because it's a higher priority for us to get a family into a larger unit. At least at this point, when it's so critical to get, especially for families, to have housing in Pilsen, because that's what the family housing is disappearing fastest. So it is a lot about fit. Most of the people who applied to the building who did not get in, it was because of a size fit, or it wasn't clear that it was going to be their primary residence at this point.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, I want to thank you, Laura and Demetrio, for your time, and I want to move right into Ricardo Lopez. He is from the Department of Housing with the city, and he's going to talk to us about the I don't know if it's new or amended Affordable Requirements Ordinance that the city is they're putting forward towards City Council next week, 2 weeks. Ricardo.
Well, this couldn't have come at a much better time. It was actually voted by City Council today. So it is official.
Perfect. All right. Hey.
Yes. It won't go into effect until October 1st of this year. But yes, today was a good day. Should I go?
Whenever you're ready, go right ahead.
Well, I would say thank you, MPDC, for the invitation. At a personal level, it is great to reconnect with McKinley Park Development Council. Prior to DOH, I worked, I'm an urban planner. I worked for CMAP, the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. One of my projects that I managed was actually the McKinley Park neighborhood plan. A lot of the chapters I wrote, and so I'm very familiar with the community and the plan. And it's great as a planner to see that it's being put into use. And I'm excited for the opportunities to come. to McKinley Park residents. I think it's a great plan, and it couldn't have been done without the support and the engagement of the residents. I've worked in a lot of communities over my past 10 years across the Chicago region, and what made this project the most fun to work with is working with passionate residents that are very involved and motivated to do good for the community. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started with my presentation. I will share my screen. Let's see. Can everyone see?
Sure can.
Okay. So, yes. So, really quick. As John mentioned, we over the past 18 months, the Chicago Department of Planning of Chicago Department of Housing has been working to make revisions to the existing Affordable Requirements Ordinance. It was one of the first initial tasks of, first initial ask of the mayor to, look at ways that we can revise the ordinance to make sure that we're recalibrating to meet the needs of every Chicagoan in the city. And so in fall of 2019, we created an Inclusionary Housing Task Force. We actually put a call for applicants. We wanted to make sure that we capture a wide array of stakeholders. We received over 200 applicants, of which we were able to welcome about 23 participants. These participants came from community advocates, market rate developers, nonprofit mission-driven developers, and other other leaders from different sectors like philanthropy. And the goal here was to make sure that we were capturing a wide array of perspectives. In the summer of, and so we met monthly up until this time last year when COVID hit, and there were a couple of months that we were not able to meet, but we very soon reconvened virtually to keep working. And I would say that outside of the meetings, the monthly meetings, there was a lot of work that went into these via email, via subgroups. We published a report. It's called the Inclusionary Housing Task Force Report. And that report really helps set the stage for the recommendations. We held a 45-day public comment period, and then we held a subject matter hearing with Committee of Housing and Real Estate council members. And then we spent December of 2020 up until literally now revising the ordinance. We held a number of public hearings, aldermanic hearings, and last month in March we introduced it. It got assigned to Committee on Housing and Real Estate, and it was voted today, and it officially became it's the official ARO. So the ARO is very complex. I think part of what I would want to convey today to you today is what the ARO is, but also how does it fit with the many tools that DOH has. I would say that, and part of me doing that is really setting the stage to really talk about what the changes are. So whenever we talk about the ARO, it's important to frame it as what it is and what it's not, and what its purpose is. And oftentimes we know that the ARO is talked about as the city's only or main tool to address affordable housing, or that it should be addressing, entire crisis. And I think it's fair to say that the ARO alone cannot do that. So here's a number that many of you may be familiar with, and it's that there's a shortage of about 120,000 affordable homes across our city. And this is a number that comes from the Institute for Housing Studies at DePaul University. So this just didn't happen overnight, right? I think if we were to take a step back and really think about what's going on here, we really have two different sort of, things that are happening here. Very serious issues. The first one on my left is that we know many of the neighborhoods in the city have experienced decades of disinvestment, wealth theft, communities that have been starved from real estate capital that have led to a lack of decent, well-kept, healthy, affordable homes and wealth building opportunities. At the same time, on the other side, we know that other parts of the city, we have had decades of inclusion by race, by class, by disability, and together, these have made Chicago one of the most segregated cities in our country. That is a major issue of the housing crisis that we really want to address. And it's the second piece here of exclusion. The ARO, it's an inclusionary tool designed to create affordable housing units where the market rate exists. And so what do we see as a solution? Really came down to two things. We want to make sure that we increase the affordable production from the ARO, but we also want to make sure that we're more efficiently directing the ARO's production to serve its inclusionary mission. Again, the idea here is not simply to maximize units, but the goal here is to create more units that serve the inclusionary goal of breaking down barriers of exclusion. So the takeaway here is that, what we're really saying is that if you need a subsidy to live affordably, we believe you should have just as many options of where to live as those who do not need a subsidy. That is our mission with the new ARO. And, here's just another way of illustrating what I just, talked about. Some of you may be familiar with this map, but, here on my left, the sort of dotted map, it's a map of the racial segregation of the city, which is one really important, but certainly not the only way in which the city is divided geographically. And on the right, it's the share of affordable housing by ward. And so here, it's very clear that with the exception of a few areas on the far north, lakefront communities of the city, like Uptown, Edgewater, Rogers Park, the northwest sides and the far southwest sides simply have not seen investments in affordable housing in any way near the numbers that the bulk of the south and west sides have. So again, here, when we think about what's the role that ARO can play in helping address the shortage of affordable housing, it is certainly it's one of the many tools that we have. And it's a tool, again, meaning the idea with it is that we want to make sure that we're using it to create affordable housing in areas that are currently lacking. That's not to say that we're taking away our focus or target in preserving or creating affordable units in disinvested areas. In fact, the ARO is one of 25 tools that DOH has, which many of them focus on allocating resources, providing rental subsidies to areas that disinvested areas that lack it. This map here, shows you, productivity of ARO from 2007 to 2020. And here again, we see that most of what's being developed has been in areas where there's high market activity. I think it's important to say here that the ARO has gone through various iterations. In 2007 up until 2015, there were no ARO units expected to be built. In other words, developers could meet their obligation by paying in lieu fee. In 2015, when the ARO was revised, it wasn't until then that we started seeing physical units being built. And then of course, we were getting out of the recession, And it wasn't really until, after 2015, 2016 that we started seeing our numbers go up. So I think it's important to note that. And overall, in terms of units that have been built on and off site, it's been about approximately 1,274, which is minimum compared to what the level of production of affordable units from our other programs. But altogether, this has generated about $145 million in lieu fees. This here, the map on the left, shows you where the in lieu fees are generated from. Again, because this is an inclusionary zoning tool, a lot of those fees you see here that are coming from areas like the West, like the Loop, West Town, the North Side areas. In the map on the right, you see where those in lieu fees are being allocated to. And so the in lieu fee that comes from developers from the ARO program go into what we call the Affordable Housing Opportunity Fund. In the Affordable Housing Opportunity Fund, they're divided 50% goes to fund to create multi-unit affordable housing and to rehab. The other half goes to, and I would say that so far out of that program, we created about 2,800 affordable for sale and rental homes outside of the ARO's areas where the ARO creates units. The other 50% go to provide rental subsidies to 3,000 extremely low income families receiving ongoing subsidies at 30% AMIs or lower. And then a lot of the affordable units that are generated through the ARO that are for sale, those are going to the Chicago Community Land Trust. Okay, so I wanted to set the stage, to talk about what the ARO is and how it fits with our other programs. And I want to spend a little bit of time here talking about the new ARO. So why don't we start with what the former ARO was, okay? So the 2015 ARO, which is still in place, here you see that most of the gray area, the set aside, which basically what it means is that of your total dwelling units that a developer is proposing, a set aside of 10% would have to be dedicated for affordable housing. And that's in all the gray areas here. And of that 10%, the requirement for the developer was to build 25% of that total 10% set aside, either on-site or off-site. If they were to be built off-site, they would have to be within a mile radius of 2 miles. The remainder, 75% of that 10% obligation could be paid in lieu. And then we have 4 different pilot areas. We have the Milwaukee pilot area, we have the Near West, the Near North, and the Pilsen Little Village. All of those have different requirements, and they were created for for specific reasons to be able, these are areas where that are vulnerable to displacement, that are facing market pressures, and so the set aside for those areas is higher. And so here's what we've done. This slide here, we essentially created 2 different geographies. Okay, so here is what we call the inclusionary areas. And the map on the far right, it's really a combination of these 2 first maps on our left. The first map shows you areas in the city of Chicago that just have under 10% of their total housing units are legally restricted affordable and have over the median household income. And then in the middle, we have areas that are under 35% that are all affordable. And these are both legally restricted, but also naturally occurring affordable housing. So combined, we have what we call here the inclusionary areas. And then we have what we call the community preservation area. So this geography, what it actually means is that it contains 1 or more existing displacement census tracts or tracts that are vulnerable to displacement. And it's also adjacent to an affluent zone and in an area where there's no more than 30% of the existing rental housing that is legally restricted affordable housing. So we created both of these two different areas using 5-year ACS census numbers. And these are maps that we're going to be updating every 3 to 5 years, with the understanding that, you know, the demographics change, you know, the market changes, and we want to make sure that we're able to, you know, upkeep, you know, these maps. So here's the new geography for the 2021 ARO. And so, you know, one of the issues that we heard is that the ARO, the existing ARO is delivering fewer units than its full potential. And so what we've done over the last year plus is we took the experience of the ARO pilots. We looked at performance that market rate developers provided us. And we also looked at best practices of inclusionary zoning laws across the country to really get a sense of to how high can we change the set aside. And what we really were trying to do is find the sweet spot to get us as many units and resources as we can, while preserving the ability of developers and investors to actually build housing. Which again, we know that without market rate, none of these units would exist. So what we're proposing, what the new ARO is this, which is that the downtown area, that's the area in blue, and all the green areas, again, you know, those are areas that we call, you know, where the amount of affordability is very low, or areas where, based on data we've determined, are, you know, experiencing displacement as a result of rising prices, or that are vulnerable to displacement. What we're saying is that we would increase the set aside from 10% to 20%. So you'll notice here that we've gotten rid of all the pilots. We got rid of the Milwaukee corridor, the near north, near west pilot. Those were scheduled to expire at the end of last year, but we extended those in December for 6 months to allow us, you know, time to work on the new proposed ARO. You notice though that the Pilsen Little Village pilot remains, and that's because that pilot specifically got implemented at a much later time, and it's not set to expire until 2023. So we are proposing for that pilot to remain until it sunsets in 2023. The other major change here, oh, and the other thing that I would mention is that the gray area, that's what we call the low mod area, and that would remain the same at 10%. The idea is that those are areas where we don't want to discourage development from taking place. And so those will remain at 10%. The second major change here, and this is the second percentage, is that we are increasing the proportion of units that must be built from 25% to 50% of the total set aside. And this will be a new citywide standard. And another change is that I mentioned how right now under the current ordinance, offsite units must be built within 2 miles of the triggering project. And one of the things that we heard from advocates and also from developers that it is often difficult to make that 2-mile radius work, because you have to find the right kind of site to place those units. And it's in fact one of the reasons why we get waiver requests. It's the offsite requirement. So what we're saying is that a developer that builds in the green area could place their offsite units anywhere in the green area, including the area that is currently bounded by the white outline. With the exception of the community preservation area. In the community preservation area, if a developer builds their unit in a community preservation area, their offsite units has to be built within 1 mile. The other piece to this is that if a developer is building a project in a TOD zone, in a transit oriented development zone, their offsite units would be required to be built in a TOD zone. So high level, those are the big major changes. What I'd like to do now is give you three examples of, okay, well, what does all that mean, right? So this is what it means. Take, for instance, here, a developer in the South Loop, right? It's a high-rise development, residential development of 200 units. Today, under the 2015 ARO, with the 10% set aside, the ARO obligation will be 20 units. And of those 20 units, 20% to 25% or 2.5% of that 10% set aside have to be built units. That equates to 5 units. And what we're saying is that those 5 units could be built on site or off site. And if they're built off site, they have to be within 2 miles. So if South Loop is here, those 5 units would have to be in the range of those 2 miles. Okay. Under the now 2021 ARO, the 20 unit that we would otherwise be getting at a 10% from 200 will be 40 units with 20% set aside. And what we're saying is that half of those 40 units, in other words, 10% of the 20% must be built. So 20 units would actually be required to be built as opposed to 5 units today. The third layer to this is that of those 20 units that must be built, we're actually requiring the developer to build 5% on site, so 10 units. And the other 5% could be built in an offsite location. So in other words, the example that I'm giving you right today is of that 20% set aside, if we were to deconstruct it, half of the 20% has to be built, that's 10%. And of that 10%, 5 has to be on site and the other 5 could be built off site. And this is really where McKinley Park benefits in this approach. That 5% that can be built off site, 10 units, rather than being within 2 miles of the South Loop, it could be placed anywhere in those green areas, including McKinley Park. And what that means is that community areas like Albany Park, like Beverly, other areas that typically don't see multifamily development could benefit from the ARO under the 2021 ARO. And so that is the 10% of the 20%. The other 10% could be paid in lieu. Why? Because the in lieu fees are so critical to the production and the functionality of our other programs that we serve. So here's another example, McKinley Park, right? I took this image from your plan. Say that in McKinley Park, you have a mid-rise. There's a development, that's coming in at 100 units. Today, under the 2015 ARO, at a 10% set aside, we would only be looking at 10 units. With the 2021 ARO, we're looking at 20 units. Today, we would only be looking at 3 units that will be required to be built. And those 3 units could be built on site in this area or anywhere that's within 2 miles. With the 2021 ARO, at 100 unit development, with 20 units being affordable units, 10 of those 20 units are required to be built as opposed to 3. Now, those 10, 5 could be on site, and 5, and this is really where it's different from the previous example. Here, because McKinley Park is in what we call the community preservation area, the rule there is that the offsite units, those 5 units, have to be within 1 mile of where that project is. Now, I want to say that we're given options to the developer. If the developer wanted to put all 20 units on site, they certainly can. If the developer wanted to put all 10 units on site, they certainly can. But the idea here is that we're given options. But because we know that, areas like McKinley Park are areas that are vulnerable to displacement, our goal is to preserve the offsite units as close as possible to the market rate project. And that is really the main difference between this scenario and this scenario. In both scenarios, McKinley Park benefits in that it could benefit from offsite units. And this is really the third and last example. And here, what we really do is we add two different layers to the scenario. We have a low-rise development. Well, what if we add another factor here? What if we say there's 41 bedrooms? So today, the requirement on the 10% is 4 units. And of those 4 units, if what the market rate developer is building is all 1 bedrooms, those 4 units would have to be 1 bedrooms. The reason why that is because the ordinance is written in such a way that requires the affordable units to be comparable to the market rate units. And a lot of what we see in the market rate development are studios and 1 bedrooms. And so that's what we typically get. And one of the things that we heard during this process is that the arrow is not targeting Chicagoans in the greatest need. And we know that, and so the other piece to this is that we know that the greatest demand for affordable housing, as you saw in the demographics that John shared with you today, are people among who are below 60%, at or below 60% AMI. So here in the 2021 ARO, we're looking at 8 units. And what we're saying is that we're expanding an incentive that we currently have in one of the pilots, which is if the developer provides bigger units, the incentive that they get is in return is that their set aside would decrease. So 8 units, instead of giving us 8 units, the developer could potentially give us 6 units, but instead of giving us 4 1-bedrooms, we could get 2 1-bedrooms and 4 3-bedrooms. And again, the idea here is that we want to make sure that we're getting bigger family size units. The other provision here is that for any offsite unit that we get that comes out of the ARO, at a minimum, it has to be a 2-bedroom unit. And so the last piece of information here that I'll leave you today is that currently under the existing ARO, a rental unit would have to be at a 60% AMI. So what we have done is we've adopted a model that's been piloted in LA that has been pretty successful in producing deeply affordable units. So basically what it means is that if the developer wants to give us a 20% set aside at a weighted average of 60% AMI, that's great. But if they want to give us more deeply subsidized units at an average of like 50 or 40% AMI, they can do so at a smaller set aside in order to accommodate that. So what that means is that if the developer gives us 3-bedroom unit or a unit at 50%, they could also give us units at 40% or even units at 30% AMI. And this is really a way for us to capture a range of AMI levels rather than just getting everything at a fixed, 60% AMI. And so this is my last slide here. And I think, other changes that we wanted to, sort of talk about is increasing the accessibility requirements. This is a standard that we're adopting a preferential leasing system, for people who need accessible units. And one of the things that we heard from advocates is that, how small the universe is for both accessible and affordable homes, particularly in higher cost neighborhoods. And so what we're doing here is we're requiring all new construction affordable units to be type A accessible, which is a higher standard of accessibility. And 10% of the total set aside must be preferential leasing, which means that before these markets go on the market for lease, we would work with the property manager, the developer, to identify residents who need accessible units. And this would require for DOH to be proactive in working with Access Living and other organizations to make sure that we identify residents that need accessible units. The second change here is that we're exploring creating a centralized leasing system. Right now, all the ARO units live with the property managers. It's very difficult to see what's available and what's not. By creating a centralized leasing system, we're able to show, the inventory of ARO units, where they are, what's available. And part of that will require us reporting annually the demographics of the tenants so that we can ensure that the units that are being generated out of the ARO are actually going to Chicagoans who need them. And the other point here is that, and this is an idea that came from Aldermanic experience, is that we would allow a higher AMI of 10% rents if it's paired with other city programs like trust funds or CHA vouchers. In other words, the developer will be getting 100% AMI rents, but the tenant will be paying 30% AMI rents. And the last one here is one that I already talked about, is if projects in TOD areas, their offsites must be in other comparable transit-oriented development areas. And so again, here I end by just showing this image, which is basically saying that affordable housing shortage is a big crisis. Inclusionary zoning is one tool among many that to help us address that challenge. I know that's a lot of information, and I don't know how much time we have left for questions, but I definitely want to have that opportunity to chat about any questions you may have. So.
Thanks, Ricardo. We got time for probably two questions. Let's do one from the chat. So Kate asked, legally restricted affordable housing, can you explain it? Is that the only units that have a price cap or other protections?
So legally restricted affordable housing means housing where there's a housing covenant or restrictions in those units, either because these are units that were created by a city subsidy, by city or government program, much like what PIHCO has, where they are creating co-op housing. There's a restricted requirement that those units must be kept affordable for a certain target. That's legally restricted for all government units that are generated through government programs. Those are all legally restricted. Naturally occurring affordable housing are houses like McKinley Park. We see a lot of that where the rent is already affordable. It's not by doing of the government or programs, it's just naturally occurring affordable. So that's really the big difference there.
Okay, great. And then does anyone else have any other questions? Just really quick ones.
Kate had a question about explaining what I mean by minimum 2 beds.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
So out of the 20% ARO requirement, half of that we're requiring to be built, and half of that could be offsite units. So if it's in a green area, those units could be anywhere in the green area. If it's in the white hash area, they would have to be within 5 miles. All of those offsite units have to be at a very minimum two bedroom units. That's the requirement. So no studios, no 1 bedrooms. The requirement is that they would have to be 2 bedrooms. And the idea here is that we want to serve families that need these units. And the other part to this too that I just want to say is that we heard that for some families, it's not really a priority to be in a mid or high-rise building. For some families, they would rather much be in a 2-flat with a backyard. And you know, and that's a way that we can see through the ARO ways that we can preserve natural occurring affordable housing. A lot of 2 flats, 3 flats that are currently affordable, we can, rather than being deconverted, we can help, you know, through offsite ARO units, maintain them affordable. So.
Great. Thank you very much, Ricardo. I appreciate the information and your time. Anthony,
Quick.
you have just quick one?
Quick.
Okay.
I'll make it quick. I had a lot more, but I'll make this quick. Thank you, Ricardo. For the units that are to be built off-site, are there time bounds on that whatsoever included in this ordinance? Meaning, those units need to be built by a certain point in time, or they can't just be put off in perpetuity. And what was the decision making in leaving out the far west, far southeast, and central south regions from being eligible to receive those offsite units?
Yeah. So the first question, I think there's two. It's two different questions, right? The first one is, well, in order for the market rate developer to you know, lease or their market rate development to get a certificate of occupancy, the affordable units have to be completed either concurrently or before. So their market rate development won't be final unless the affordable units are done first or concurrently. I think that's the first question you're asking. So, and the second part to this, and I don't know if that's what you meant, how long do they remain affordable? If it's a rental unit, the affordability requirement is 30 years. They must remain affordable for 30 years. If it's a for sale unit, it's 30 years, but if within those 30 years, the person sells the unit, the clock restarts. It's not until someone remains in their unit for 30 years that unit specifically has met its 30-year requirement, if that makes any sense. Yeah. So your other question is, maybe your other question is regarding the maps. How do we determine the maps?
You don't have to go into the determination, mainly just, you know, why the reason for new, giving an opportunity for new development to happen in the far west, far southeast, and central south areas, which are part of those areas that have been, for a long time disinvested in. You know, why leave those areas out to get the opportunity to have new development, new units created in those areas?
I would say because if you look at this map, these are areas that when we look at the total affordable inventory of affordable housing in the city, those are areas that don't have much of affordable units. And so given that the ARO is an inclusionary tool, we really want to make sure that we're funneling and we're creating affordable units in those areas that lack it.
I meant for the offsite units. I apologize. I meant for the offsite in lieu.
So yeah, so for the offsite, if a developer builds in Lincoln Park, or most of the development we see right now would be, say, like in West Town or the Loop or Uptown. There are other areas that, you know, lack affordable housing that typically they don't see development. And so what it allows us to do by allowing the offsites to be placed in what we call inclusionary areas is that we're finding a way to create units, affordable units, where otherwise under the existing we wouldn't be able to do that. So in the example that I gave, the development that in the South Loop, right now, they would only be restricted to 2 miles. A community that's facing, that's vulnerable to displacement, like say McKinley Park, wouldn't benefit from any of those offsite units. And so by us opening up the radius to specific areas that need them. Communities like McKinley Park, like Albany Park, where like Beverly will be able to benefit from offsite units. Again, the developer can build them on site, but the idea here is that we want to be more strategic with the offsite units as to where they go by targeting areas that are, that are experiencing, market forces of displacement or that are vulnerable, and in areas that lack affordable housing. And I want to point out too that we're only talking about half of the 20%. The other half go into the in lieu fees, which really, if you think about it, if you look at it, we're targeting the city as a whole, because through the in lieu fees, we're generating multifamily units. We're providing rental subsidies for renters. So really, we're divided it in half, 50% where we want to see them built, and the other 50% to support existing programs that we would currently have in place. So
great. Thanks, Ricardo. Appreciate it. Just one or two quick things from our end. Here we go. If you guys have any questions or comments that you guys think of afterwards, feel free to contact the MPDC either by email or Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, and we will be more than happy to pass along any questions or comments to our PIHCO folks or Ricardo, and then we'll get you the answers that you need. We are trying to form a new committee. So this one would be focused on TOD, so transit-oriented development, and kind of the goal for this is to kind of help shape what TOD would come in the neighborhood, kind of what we as residents want to see there. Whether it's green infrastructure or height requirements, height minimums, anything like that. If you guys want to be a part of that committee, please contact us through any of these platforms. Reach out to us, and we will be more than happy to include you in that committee. And I think that's largely it. If you have any desire to learn something for May's meeting, please reach out to us. We're more than happy to take suggestions about what you guys want to hear about, whether it's new city projects, things going on in the neighborhood, things like that. Something from the neighborhood plan. Please let us know. We're here to answer your questions about what you guys want to see. So with that, I'm gonna stop sharing this. And then I want to thank everyone for their time. And I know we ran a little long, but I think this was very valuable information. Our next meeting is going to be on May 19th, 7 p.m. I'm going to assume that we're going to still be virtual. So be on the lookout for that meeting information, both on all of our social medias, as well as on our email list. If you want to be on the email list, please let us know, and we'll be happy to add you that. So again, thanks everybody. Have a good night. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Demetria, and thank you, Ricardo, for sharing everything that you did tonight. Appreciate it. All right. Good night, everybody.